What's up guys, Mike here and welcome back to From the Attic. Well, maybe I should say welcome to From the Attic 2.0 because I spent the last couple of weeks locked up in my attic to reshape the channel according to what you guys want to watch. Yes, games are not the only thing getting remastered in 2021. First, let me introduce you to someone special. Me. Sort of, more like the cartoon version of me. Big shout out to Yunsen for making this super awesome avatar as well as the most badass channel banner on planet Earth. I hope you guys are just as excited as I am for this new beginning, and to celebrate I wanted to go back to an old classic of mine. That's enough chit chat, let's move on to the actual reason you clicked on this video. Have you been feeling depressed ever since Hogwarts Legacy has been delayed? Are you moving through life with a constant weight on your shoulder? Well, I think I got exactly what you need.
Coming to bed, honey?
Yes, dear.
Yes, today I'm going to be talking about LEGO Harry Potter, which actually came out 10 years ago, believe it or not. By the way, there's a lot of stuff I didn't realize were 10 years old. Inception, the first iPad, Friday, this masterpiece by Rebecca Black, and also the last Harry Potter movie came out. What? But for the purpose of this video, I didn't play the 10-year-old version of the game, I played the remastered collection that came out in 2016 for the PS4, which includes both games. Yes, the full 7 years at Hogwarts are divided into 2 different games. I mean, if you're gonna release the Deathly Hallows in 2 parts, you might just do the same thing with the games, right? And let's be honest here, if you grew up with Legos like myself, you know you're going to be buying both of these no matter what. Legos were like drugs. During my Lego phase in the early 2000s, when I was blasting some Linkin Park 24/7, Legos would be the only thing I would ask on Christmas. Look, here's an actual picture of me on Santa's knees asking for a new set while crying my eyes out. I heard that man is in jail now, but that's not enough to destroy the great memories I have with Legos. Alongside Crash Bandicoot and the Power Rangers, these were a huge part of my childhood, much like the Harry Potter movies. If you're not familiar with the licensed LEGO games, they are basically funny retellings of your favorite franchises. We've had Star Wars, Batman, Indiana Jones, and a bunch of others like Galador, Defenders of the Outer Dimension. Remember that? No? Alright, let's move on. But Star Wars was the first actual franchise to receive the LEGO treatment back in 2005. We did have this weird Harry Potter LEGO creator thing in 2002, but Star Wars was truly the first movie series to be adapted in the formula that we all know and love today, which is this action-adventure collectathon with a very particular sense of humor. Harry Potter is arguably one of my favorite entries in the early LEGO franchise, back when there were not fully open world games. I love those, but I kinda have a soft spot for the more linear ones. I say one of my favorites and not two because to me, the 2 games are kinda just one single thing, despite the improvements and the slight changes made in the second game. So everything I say from now on can be applied to both titles, and when it's not the case, I'll make it clear. But first, a little history class. LEGO Harry Potter was developed by Traveller's Tales, a British developer founded in 1989 that is now actually called TT Games. Yep, they took their really cool looking logo and their awesome name and basically went like this.
Well, first I draw this head, then I erased some of the more detailed features, and 1, 2, 3...
Even though I started to acknowledge the studio with their LEGO games, I realized while I was writing this video that I actually played a bunch of their past titles when I was younger. They did a couple of PS2 Crash Bandicoot games, and they also worked on Disney adaptations like Finding Nemo, which is actually the first PS2 game I've ever played. Don't judge me, it came with the console. Harry Potter is actually the 4th franchise they've adapted for the LEGO series, meaning that they had already tweaked their recipe when they built this game. And you can tell because LEGO Harry Potter took everything that worked in those first games and added a couple of extra layers, like adding pineapple on pizza. But when I got back into it, I was wondering if the game would still hold up in 2021. And as soon as I saw that opening cutscene, the nostalgia immediately kicked in. These games were so much fun, especially for fans of the wizarding world, and even if you're an adult, they will still make you laugh and you will still have a blast. I mean, you get to freely explore Hogwarts, meet all your favorite characters, and relive the stories you fell in love with. What's not to like? But hold your horses, don't expect a word-by-word retelling of the books. What you also shouldn't expect is to see things that were cut out from the books and that you desperately wanted to see in the films because the games are clearly based on the movies. And even then, a lot of stuff was cut left and right to make each story fit in a 6th level structure, which leads to a game that is practically impossible to understand if you've never seen the movies or read the books. Just look at how they reveal Snape is the Half-Blood Prince. What also doesn't help is the fact that characters don't speak. Yes, in the early LEGO games, the characters spoke in weird Sims gibberish or just made strange noises. Some very questionable choices were also made, like making a boss fight with Moaning Myrtle, having a full-length level in Hagrid's backyard just to find fish for Bugbeak, or even weirder, a whole underwater level with Harry and Ron looking for Gryffindor's sword while using sawfish bones to cut through ice. Okay, these levels do end up feeling like filler content, but most of these anomalies can be easily explained. You see, a huge part of Harry Potter is very dialogue driven, but that doesn't make for super interesting video game levels, especially when the characters don't talk. The best episodes are easily the ones that are more action oriented, like the Goblet of Fire with the Triwizard Tournament and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 because of the final battle. These definitely have less filler content, and that's when the games are at their strongest, when they're not trying to compensate for the lack of action with random nonsense. I mean, even my favorite Harry Potter movie, which is Prisoner of Azkaban, is actually my least favorite episode in the first game. So if you're looking for a faithful adaptation, you won't find it here. But LEGO games were never about being faithful to the original material. They're basically parodies. It's all about playing with the audience's expectations and making jokes out of practically everything. Seriously, you could literally add a laugh track on top of every single death in the franchise. The game tackles story in a very laid-back kind of way, and the same thing can be said about the gameplay, which is simplistic but fun. LEGO games are like your grandma's apple pie. They're comfort food that you consume in a warm blanket around Christmas time. Basically, each movies are divided into a series of levels, and in between these levels, you get to freely explore a hub world. In the case of Harry Potter, the scale of that world is a significant improvement over the previous games, because yes, the hub world is a shockingly well-realized Hogwarts. Obviously, it's not perfectly accurate, but it completely nails the atmosphere of the movies. For a game filled with lifeless Lego blocks, it feels surprisingly alive, and the main reason for that is really the attention to detail. When you walk around, you can see students talking to each other, going to class, you can come across your teachers, your friends can wave at you, and a bunch of little things like that. The environments are also, once again, surprisingly not static. You can interact with a lot of stuff, fool around with statues and paintings, and when you start feeling bored, you can just become the school bully. There's obviously a lot of care that went into building a somewhat believable school, one that is very reminiscent of what we see in the films. Sadly, you can't explore the whole entire thing, but you still have most of the famous landmarks. But what I really like is how they took so many elements that could have just been story stuff and turned them into actual gameplay mechanics. Ghosts, for example, are pretty much your own personal GPS that you follow to reach your next objective, and common rooms are actually limited to the students of their respective houses. So if you want to go inside Ravenclaw's common room, for instance, you will need to make a polyjuice potion and disguise yourself as one of their students. But to make these potions, you actually need to learn them in class. Same thing with the spells. But don't get your hopes up, the game doesn't have an internal clock or a day and night cycle. Going to class is just part of the story, meaning you cannot skip your lessons to sneak inside Dumbledore's office, which is kind of a missed opportunity. It would have been really cool for classes to have an actual effect on your progression, like without this or that particular spell, you would miss entire sections of levels. Yes, I know some sections and puzzles are in fact locked off during your first playthrough, but it's not because of player decisions, it's just because you haven't reached a certain point in the story yet, which is a bummer. I guess we'll have to wait for Hogwarts Legacy for that. But Hogwarts is not the only place you get to explore. There's Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, Gringotts, and in the second game there's also a couple of camp sections. And all these places have the same level of interactivity, which is really cool. Now let's talk about the levels, because this is where you'll be spending most of your time in this game. So what do you actually do in LEGO Harry Potter? Well, you break stuff. But that's not all there is to it. You do break a lot of stuff, but you also build, solve puzzles, do some basic platforming challenges, and collect a lot of shiny things. When I say a lot, it's a lot. There's Lego pieces, crests, gold blocks, students you have to save, red bricks, new characters to collect, and you even need to find 200 chocolate frogs. Alright, the last one wasn't true, but you get the idea. The levels themselves are generally pretty easy. Most of the time, progression is about using the right spells or the right character abilities to solve some type of environmental puzzle, so it's all about finding the right combination. Unfortunately, none of the puzzles are particularly difficult. In fact, I'd say there's just no difficulty factor whatsoever, much like the combat and the platforming, which are kinda bare bones. But you need to remember that these games are supposed to be super family friendly. I mean, you can play them with your little brother or your uncle who never played a video game in his life and still have a freaking blast and a good laugh. And honestly, if you like collecting stuff like I do, the game is not going to be boring despite its simplistic nature. One of the things that Lego Harry Potter brings to the table is obviously the whole wizard thing. So that means spells. You got all your classics and you can easily switch between them depending on your needs. This is a really fun system. Yes, it would have been cool to have puzzles that demand more creative use of the spells, but I still think they're well implemented and most importantly, fun to use. And wait till you've unlocked the special spells, that's when the real fun begins. As for the potions though, this definitely could have been improved. You can craft potions that will make you stronger, turn yourself invisible and things like that, but the options are pretty limited and their use are very straightforward. What's interesting though is that some levels might require spells or potions that you haven't learned yet, so you just need to continue on with the story, go to class, and then come back to these levels in the free play mode. This is pretty much when the games truly come to life in my opinion, because here you can replay the levels and switch between every single character you've unlocked in the game, and there's a lot of them. You can play as Dumbledore, Snape, Bellatrix, the whole Weasley family, and even the one you've always dreamed of, Gryffindor boy. Like I said earlier, the two games are very similar, so much so that I can't help but see them as one single thing. But the second one does make a couple of improvements aside from just more spells and more Hogwarts. First off, the game looks significantly better. Better lighting, better textures, better animations, everything has this shiny and glowy look to it. I mean, just look at these reflections. Did you know that Lego Harry Potter is actually the first game ever to feature real-time ray tracing? That's not true, but what is true is that the idea of ray tracing is actually 500 years old. Yep, I'm not kidding, you can look it up. What I also really enjoyed about the visuals is seeing how the story influences how the game looks, and these changes are much more noticeable in the second game. For example, here's how Diagon Alley looks during the Order of the Phoenix versus how it looks during the Deathly Hallows. Cool stuff. From the gameplay side of things, they also added a dueling system where you need to match the opponent's spells while also trying to avoid or block incoming attacks. Once again, this is pretty simple stuff, but it definitely made the combat encounters much more interesting, especially for those big important story moments, because you actually fight Voldemort and not just throw furnitures at him. Lego Harry Potter is not a groundbreaking game by any means, but it's one of those titles that holds a special place in my heart. It's the kind of game that you just turn your brain off, break stuff, and collect shiny things for a couple of hours. I believe that this simplicity is actually part of the reason why Lego games tend to age pretty well. Obviously, the Lego franchise has greatly evolved since then, but these older titles remain full of charm, and if you still haven't played them, do yourself a favor and pick up this collection right now, you won't regret it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you like this new direction for the channel. As you notice, it's still me talking about video games with some chill music in the background, but simply under a new coat of paint. Me personally, I really like this new look and I can't wait to see where it takes us. Also, if you're new here and want to join the Attic family, come hang out in the Discord server. The link can be found down below.